been a long journey, very lonely, very scary, because I just didn't know about anything. Most of us who get sick, sometimes completely bedridden, wheelchair bound like I was at some points, not being able to do simple tasks really scare you. None of the doctors have any idea of what's going on, no medications, none of it is helping you. My body was already telling me something, you need to slow down. I was getting more and more tired. One point, it just all fell apart. One time, I still remember that day, I went to my bed, I was feeling that awful fatigue, had that virus. My body started to come back to that feeling of safety, and my brain as well. Start going to the gym, which is what people expect, when they start doing an activity. Okay, well, now I should be able to go there 3 times a week. I chose to refer to myself. I knew that I was going to recover. For all intents and purposes, I was healed. See that as a much more important factor, way to describe someone as healed and to understand if you are healed or not. It's not in you being able to climb a mountain, which I couldn't do at that point because I was still in bed, but I knew that, well, it's only a matter of time.
How's it going, Thrivers? Miguel here from CFS Recovery. In this video, we have Santa, and she's somebody who had CFS, was actually bedridden for 4 years. It's a long time to be bedridden, but now she's living a full normal life. She can exercise, doesn't worry about crashing, has confidence in her health, and even homeschooling her 3 kids, which is a lot of work for someone who was bedridden for 4 years. Obviously, now she's much better, and she also has her own page where she's inspiring so many people with CFS and long COVID and helping educate them and give them tips about recovery. So, Santa, you want to quickly introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, I think that your introduction was really quite perfect. Yeah, I've had CFS for about 4 years. It's been a long journey, very lonely, very scary. Because I just didn't know anything about anything, like I think most of us who get sick. And I didn't know if I could come out of this, if I could ever live a normal life. And I had to rebuild it, step by step by step. And I just want to share this message of hope, that it is possible to recover. Definitely, just if you're listening to this and you're sick, just keep on going. I know that in the midst of such scary and awful debilitating symptoms that leave you sometimes completely bedridden or wheelchair bound like I was at some points, or just not being able to do simple tasks, can really scare you, and none of the doctors have any idea of what's going on, no tests, or medications, none of it is helping you. But thankfully, something that I always say, such conditions are actually not something that has to be terminal or lifelong. And there are ways to come out of these states, of these conditions and these chronic symptoms. So that's just amazing news for all of us, with who've ever had any such symptoms, that there is healing and you don't actually even need, for the most part, any medications or any doctors or anything, and you can do it all by yourself, from home. So yeah.
hmm Yeah. And the reason I wanted to bring you on here was, you also make tons of content just like myself. You have so many videos online giving so many different tips that's reaching so many people. So obviously you know what you're doing, you know how to recover, you've recovered yourself, and it's been quite the journey. And just like me, you're taking all of these experiences and things you've learned and like packaging it into videos and content, and then really trying to share it with the world. But just so people really understand where you came from, you know, how did this all start for you? You said you had it for about 4 years. What kicked this thing off?
So in the place where I am now, I can look back, and I actually do look back at my whole life, because I think that's very important. Because I think people can sometimes put a lot of emphasis on, this is the day that I got sick, or I had this virus and that made me unwell, or this certain event and I never recovered from it, which was similar to myself. I had a virus and then I never recovered from the virus, but that virus is not the actual root cause of any such chronic symptoms, and you need to dig deeper and think about, okay, how was actually my life? And I usually ask people, how was your life in the few years leading up to you getting unwell? Because when you look at that, you will see a lot of, most likely, 99%, 99.9% of people that I talk to, they would say, there's been a lot of traumatic things happening, a lot of hardship, a lot of toxicity, maybe in relationships or in their environment, just all of these things. And generally, it just all becomes too much for your nervous system, for your body, for your mind, and it just gives up. And in a way, your body just tries to preserve the little bit of energy that you have left and to tell you in a really strong and loud way, okay, you need to stop now. You need to change things in your life. Otherwise, you won't be able to live in the way that you're living right now. And so, yeah, I just understand now that I have never actually been a healthy person. Even as a child, I was an unhealthy child, in a holistic sense. Physically, mentally, there have been traumas, like all of us have traumas. And yeah, so in let's say the year leading to me getting unwell, I've had a lot of physical, emotional hardships happening one after another. But it's not just that year, we need to look at our whole life and see just how many awful, hard, traumatic things we have been through. And then you will start to realize, oh, actually, I can see a pattern here. And that's how I was starting to feel worse. And also, there have been symptoms in the last few months before I got completely bedridden, which again, for the most part, I was just ignoring. My body was already telling me something, you need to slow down. I was getting more and more tired in very, in a very weird, strange way, which I'm sure you understand. And everybody with chronic symptoms, that tiredness, which can only be described as fatigue, as something that you've never had before, that is truly debilitating. And I didn't know what it was. And I had bouts of it. It would come and go. And I would just think, well, I have three young children. I'm just tired. That's normal, even though it did feel abnormal still. But I didn't listen to any of the signals that my body was given to me. And at one point, it just all fell apart. And one time, I still remember that day, I went to my bed. I was feeling that awful fatigue, and I had that virus, and I never pretty much came downstairs for months, and some in a way years as well, if you don't count the times when I went out to doctors in my wheelchair. So yeah, it's a lifetime of events that led to that specific point of me getting sick.
Hmm. That's how it was for me too. I thought it was just a singular event where, you know, something happened. And I was like isolated that event. I'm like, what did I do that day? What did I take? How did that happen? But as time went on, I realized, like, wait a minute, no, there were definite signs leading up to this. In fact, hundreds of signs, like the insomnia, the not being able to to sleep, insomnia, and the heart palpitations, getting tired over the years, just feeling fatigued, feeling anxiety, things like that. But I didn't really notice it at the time. I thought everybody dealt with those things until you kind of hit that brick wall and, you know, life kind of slaps you in the face and is like, hey, hello, there's something wrong here. And then it's kind of never the same after that, or never the same for the next several
Yeah.
months or even years. So we see it all the time. People at first they think it's a singular event, but then they realize looking back, there's so many things leading up to it. Now, here's an interesting question. Do you think it's more so kind of what happens to you in life, like leading up to it, or is it based on like your interpretation of certain events? Because I found this very interesting. Some people looking from the outside, they went through crazy stress, crazy situations, but they didn't get CFS. And other people, similar situations and they did get CFS. So, from what you've seen, what do you think makes the biggest difference with that, with somebody who does get CFS and doesn't?
Mm. Um, in my personal experience and opinion, it's the fact that we're all so different and unique. So the makeup of my DNA, my nervous system, um, all the different things that are in my line, my family, that my parents have had, my grandparents, all the different things. That is very unique to me. That will be different from yourself and from another person. And so certain events, just like, when we talk about trauma, to one person, some event might be traumatic to the extent where, they would have to recover from that for months. And to some person, they will recover in a few days. And I think that comes down to literally just the uniqueness of our bodies, like I said, our DNA, our nervous system. So, yeah, I think that's why things play out differently.
Mhm. Yeah, I see it a similar way as well. Like some people, yeah, in reality, they're more prone to having a more hypersensitive nervous system than others. But it's not necessarily a bad thing because that sensitivity in the beginning, it's not extremely hypersensitive, but that sensitivity also it kind of makes you more aware of things. Like me, I remember sitting in a classroom, I couldn't sit still and I would notice everything. I could retain information very easily as well. I could listen to something once and understand it. So it's like a double-edged sword, right? My brain was just going 100 miles an hour. So it was good for certain areas of my life. But in other areas, it also made me overthink quite a bit.
Mhm,
And reminisce on situations and think about 20 different scenarios. If I do this, then this could happen. Now I don't do that anymore as much. But yeah, I think it's sometimes just the way we're wired coming into
mhm,
this. But the
mhm,
cool thing is neuroplasticity, the fact that you can change some of that, right? Which
mhm,
is I think something we both preach is neuroplasticity, how you can change the wiring of your brain. So, going back to your situation, when you were bedridden for 4 years and, barely functional, what are some things that were going through your mind? Like, let's bring you back to a day where you're in bed, looking at the ceiling, you can't really move. How do you stay strong in that moment? Like, what keeps you going? What were you telling yourself to keep on going?
Well, the number one thing, because I'm a believer, I believe in God, and that really helped me. That kept me going. To ask God for help, for strength, um, would carry on going. Secondly, I think, everything that happens in our life happens for a reason, and certain things, even in a way, prepare us for other events that might come our way. So I have three children, and all of my pregnancies were really hard. And I had something called hyperemesis gravidarum, where you don't get a morning sickness. You're literally basically 24/7 have nausea, and you can vomit up to 50 times a day. You can't keep any water, any food down. And I had to be on a drip to receive anti-sickness medication, water, because I couldn't literally even eat at all, apart from a slice of something
Wow,
per day.
that's
So
intense.
yeah, and I before having my first child, I never even knew about anything like this. Just like with CFS, when we come into it, we don't even know what it is, how anyone can help us. And um, when I had that condition three times, I for the most part I was bedridden with it as well before having CFS, and I think in a way, even though it was awful, that prepared me. Um, yeah, it's in a very harsh way, kind of like training, boot camp. That was a preparation for me then having CFS and having to stay in bed for 4 years. So that was another thing that kept me going, because I'd already been bedridden in my life. I knew that, if I can just come out of it, if I can just find a way, I just have to do it. Um, and I guess, many people who do get CFS, we can be quite perfectionistic. We like to push ourselves. And thankfully, that is one quality that I think people can misuse, obviously, when they push themselves too much, and then they become even worse and worse, and they're not listening to their body. But if you use that energy that you have and that resilience to put it to good use, like you're saying, to put it into brain retraining, change the way you operate, you think, you do things, the choices that you make. So yeah, if you just stay resilient in that sense and push yourself towards recovery, then I think you will recover. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the approach I took because I have I have this thing where if I want to do something, I'll get obsessed with it. Uh,
Yeah.
and so it was a double-edged sword,
Yeah.
when I wanted to work a lot and do this and that, I would work a lot, too much, not sleep, neglect everything else. I almost got too extreme in one area of life, but I use that same mindset, the same thinking patterns to my advantage when my doctor shared all this information with me. Like I was obsessed with recovery. I was obsessed with responding well to symptoms. It was like a game to me. I was obsessed with going through the progress cycles of having a flare up, responding well, and then my capacity increasing after that. So that's what I became obsessed with. So I started correlating and associating these flare ups and these symptoms, this whole CFS thing with almost like a challenge. But now I understood how the rules of the game worked versus, it's like playing a game where you don't understand the rules and you're kind of just doing whatever. You're rolling the dice. You don't know what cards to put down if you're playing a board game. But now you start to understand the rules of the game. You understand there's an actual strategy and you're not just winging it the whole time, hoping for the best. So that's when things really changed for me. For you, when did you start turning things around? Because you were bedridden for quite a while, very debilitating, but you kept going. You kept trying things. Oh, and actually, before we do that, what things did you try in order to get better?
I think anything pretty much that you can think of. I tried it. I can't even remember everything. I had POTS as well, which is basically the same dysregulation of your nervous system. Is just a different type of symptom, and most of people with CFS have that. So after a few years, I don't like taking medicines at all.
Same.
Um, yeah, and I tried my best to just not take anything. Um, I was in a lot of pain, but I was like, I don't want to take painkillers. I don't want to get addicted to them. I don't want to be taking them every day. I just want to figure out what to do to get rid of this pain. Same with POTS and everything. But at the end, so sort of like closer to maybe 2 year mark, 3 year mark, I did try some POTS medication because I was just so desperate because nothing was working. And it didn't help me. It lowered my heart rate at some points, but it wasn't the answer because all the other symptoms were still there. Yeah, but prior to that, I would just use the very little, the tiniest bit of energy that I had, and all the brain fog was so terrible. I couldn't even, yeah, which I'm sure you can understand. I couldn't think. I couldn't understand the simplest of information. But whatever I could do, I would just research on all the forums, all the websites, anything that can be done to. Well, first I had to even research to understand what I had, and I didn't want to acknowledge that I even had CFS because everybody was saying that if that's what you have, then basically there's very little chance that you would recover. So I was like,
Mm.
okay, well then I don't have that. And then the more I was reading, I understood, yes, that's exactly what I have, and now I just need to find a way to heal. Um, So anything you can think of, holistic, functional doctors. I had some kind of oxygen machine that you just like use. You inhale it. I went into the oxygen chamber, osteopathy. I can't think of everything.
Hmm.
There was a vagus nerve um, thing that
Like
you
a
like you
stimulator, vagus
yeah,
nerve
yeah,
stimulation. Yeah.
stimulation, yeah, that you attach to your ear, which I think can actually be helpful um, in order to reach optimum health, not to heal from chronic conditions. But now, if I wanted to, I could use it just to, because it just helps you to reach that level of optimal health, but it cannot heal you. So yeah, nothing I had ever tried worked. But if you're talking about one of the biggest things that actually helped me make progress, I would say it was taking responsibility for my life and for my healing. Because I think, again, 99% of people, when they first start trying to heal, it's very hard for them to accept the fact that they are in that position because of the different choices that they made in life, and that they have full responsibility for their healing. It's not the doctors, it's not their family, it's not their friends who should, pull them out of that condition. Of course, all these people can and should help you, ideally, but they cannot do what you have to do in order to heal. And,
Hmm.
we'll look at our life right now, or when we're sick, 95% of everything that we can see in our life is a result of our choices and decisions. It applies to sickness as well, and to keeping on being sick. There is obviously, of course, an element of you not knowing everything, which is where I was for the first year or so, 1.5 years, where I was just trying to even find out what's going on with me, how to heal. Um, but once you do have that knowledge and you understand, oh, actually, yes, I can see this is how healing can happen. And even if you might not believe in it, which is what I was like at first, when I first heard of brain retraining, I heard it quite early on. Uh,
Me too.
but I just dismissed it. I was like, what is this woo woo rubbish? You can't do anything to your brain, you can't retrain it. What is even this? And I just dismissed it. And then after about 2 years, and I kept hearing about it and people were healing, and I was like, okay, I need to properly look into this. I researched it, I understood how the brain works, and I was like, actually, all of this is, this is scientific knowledge. It is a fact of life. That's how brain is. Our brain can change, and yes, it can and does get stuck in certain patterns due to things like, trauma, different hardships, and all these things. And it only means that I have to now try it, apply it properly, and I know that it then should work, which is exactly what happened. But the first step was taking that responsibility and understanding that actually, it seems that I am my own enemy because of the things that I believe in, things that I expose myself to. Even, when you read all those forums where people talk about how recovery is not possible, all of that had to go, all that negativity, toxicity. And yeah, to understand, I actually, in a way, hold the key to my healing. And I have to do what I can to heal, which is what I did. And yeah, just want to encourage anyone who's listening to this, that there is so much freedom in understanding that you hold the power and you have that responsibility on you to heal, because then it means you don't actually need any external medications and doctors, like I said. But there are all these amazing tools that you can use to help your brain to retrain it and to come out of this state, because it's not really a sickness or a condition. It's just a state that your brain has chosen based on the things that you have experienced in life, because it's trying to protect you from more harm, more trauma, more you pushing yourself, being perfectionistic, or being a people pleaser, having no boundaries, all these things. Um, I think they come up for most people that I talk to, that are healing, and that I'm sure you've heard as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So to sum all of that up, is take responsibility and realize that you do have the power within to fix this thing. And, when people used to tell me that, I would get very offended. When they say take responsibility, I would say, what do you think I'm doing every single day? Do you think I'm just sitting here,
Yeah.
not trying? And you think what do you think I'm doing? So I totally understand why people would hear that and, they get offended. And the way I like to say it, it's at some point after you've been through the gauntlet of medical testing and trying supplements and IVs and this therapy, that therapy, detox, if those things don't work, at some point you start to think in your mind like, wait a minute, okay, this doesn't make sense. Why is nothing working? And then they stumble across like one of our videos, right? Where we're talking about, hey, this is coming from your brain. Your brain is sending the wrong signals to your body. That's why you're feeling the physical symptoms. We're not saying this is all in your mind. We're not saying you can just snap your fingers and think differently and all of a sudden now you could go from bedridden to running outside. But it's realizing at some point that, hey, this is not going to be an external fix. Sure, medication can help. Sure, some, brain retraining devices could help. They could move the needle a little bit, but ultimately, to really get to the next chapter in your life and close this chapter, it's going to come from within. And more specifically, it's going to come from the brain. And the only person who can rewire that and make those changes is yourself, right? It's yourself. And it's through watching videos like this, it's through responding well to symptoms. I always say that's the golden rule in recovery. Because if you get that right, you really start to create uh, you start to reawaken the more normal functioning neural pathways. So once you realize that all this is, it's a software glitch, essentially, or trying to fix
Mhm.
that software, I think it makes it so much more simple and so much less intimidating because now you actually know what you're dealing with. So, that's when things changed for me when I realized, okay, I'm not banking on this next supplement to help me go from bedridden to walking outside. I'm not banking on this detox or this or that. Like, this is going to come from within. And that's when my doctor explained to me what was going on. And you only really get there once you realize it makes logical sense, once you understand what's going on, right? Um,
Mhm.
that's when things really changed for me. So
Mhm.
for you, what was that turning point? Uh, what were some of the first things that you came across or read or implemented that helped you start sitting up out of bed, walking around your house, going up and down stairs? What was that big shift for you?
Um, I think one of the biggest things was when I learned about something called limiting beliefs and what they mean in terms of recovery. We already talked about, taking responsibility for your healing, and I agree with what you said, that the way you respond to symptoms holds pretty much, I don't know, 70% of your recovery, and together with that is working on certain beliefs that you have about the symptoms,
Mhm.
about activities, about healing and recovery in general. Um, there are a lot of preconceived ideas that you probably picked up by, going on these doom forums,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
seeing it on Instagram, or even just the conventional medicine, what you heard from doctors who are like, well, it's a chronic condition, so it's going to stay with you for a lifetime. You can't do anything about it. There's nothing we can do. There's nothing you can do to heal, which is what most doctors would tell you. Um, So yeah, when I understood that these were actually very wrong ideas, wrong beliefs that I held about about even being able to do a certain thing, about how I perceived the aftermath, which people refer to as the crash, how even my brain perceives the language that I use when I
Hmm.
talk, when I think. And I even ask people around me, my family, to no longer refer to the crash as the crash, you
Yeah.
know. I would
Yeah.
tell them that right now I think I said something like, right now I'm feeling restful, you know, and that changes it completely, how your brain perceives it. And
Hmm.
obviously, you're still feeling awful, you have debilitating symptoms, uh, but you flip that script to work, it starts working for you instead of
Hmm.
against you, where you try to get rid of the harmful language, um, harmful thoughts that you have that are literally preventing you from taking that step and doing that activity and being okay with the aftermath, because you understand that your body and your brain are simply, it's kind of like if you don't go to the gym regularly, let's say for a whole year, or you've never been to the gym, and then you start going to the gym, and you which is what people expect, when they start doing an activity. Okay, well, now I should be able to go there 3 times a week. Well, you probably won't be able to do that straight away, because your body is not ready for that. And if you try and push yourself and go in even harder and harder, okay, I'll go to the gym every day now, um, you will have that aftermath, which is comparable to a crash, So, so the way that you see that aftermath and talk about it, you shouldn't let it have so much power over you, where, which is exactly where I was in that situation. And I understand that everybody who is going through that can experience that, where they just fear the crash, they fear the symptoms that are coming after they do an activity, which then makes them stop doing everything altogether. But then if we again look at how our bodies work and at the science of, muscle growth and all of that, you will see that, okay, well, then you do less, then you're going to be able to do even less, even less, even less. And that's how you can become, more severe, more severe. So, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
I
Uh,
forgot what the question even. Oh, I think the question was, what was the biggest mind shift you
yeah,
had? And basically, you said it's like reframing those flare ups essentially,
yeah.
and not being paralyzed by fear from these flare ups, thinking it's a crash every time and it's going to bring
Hmm.
you back to square one. And yeah, I think everybody who's had CFS does go through that phase where everything becomes scary,
Yeah.
because you no longer trust your body, right? Because when you try to do something, it's almost like before we understood what was going on, it's like we try to do the smallest thing and it feels like your body just punishes you.
Hmm.
So you fall into this cycle of kind of, at least I hated my body and my nervous system because it was punishing me for trying to go get water downstairs. It's
Yeah.
punishing me for trying to take a shower, right? But part of the problem was I would do these activities, and even before doing the activity, I was already having in my mind, like, oh, is this going to make me crash? Is it going to
Hmm.
bring me back to square one? So going into the activity, I was already anticipating worst case scenarios. And then afterwards, after I did the activity or during, when I start to feel some of the symptoms, already my mind is downward spiraling. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, should I be doing this? Oh, what if I crash? What if I go back to square one? And that brings in a lot of fear, and it brings in that survival instinct for your nervous system. And that survival instinct is what's going to make the body go into this kind of hibernation freeze mode.
Hmm.
Because a crash is essentially your nervous system forcing you to go into freeze mode. That's why you can't move sometimes,
Hmm.
or even it's hard to even breathe, even rolling over in bed. Your body will do anything it can to try to stop you doing that. Even thinking, it's hard to think in that stage because you're in complete freeze mode. And then after that, you come out of freeze mode, then you flip back and forth between freeze and fight or flight. So it's like adrenaline dumps,
Yeah.
crazy heart rate, but freeze mode at the same time. So for me, it was very similar to you. It was changing the label I had on a flare up because the way my doctor explained it to me, he said, "Look, regardless of what you do, you're probably going to have symptoms. You know, when you stand up and go to the washroom, you're going to have symptoms. When you sit in that wheelchair, whether you like it or not, you're going to have symptoms. So just accept that." Now, here's the game changer. You actually have control over the level of symptoms that you feel, right? If you were to stay completely neutral throughout the experience, you go sit in that chair, yeah, your symptoms will probably be like here. If you start thinking to yourself, I'm going to crash, I shouldn't have done that. Uh-oh, this is not good. Well, guess what? That will fuel your symptoms because that's going to put you more in freeze mode. So you go from here to up here. So now the question is, what level of symptoms do you want to feel, Miguel? Would you rather feel less symptoms or more symptoms? Because that's what is the determining factor between the two. It's your level of fear and anticipation. Uh, Now, in the beginning, it's impossible to have zero fear. You're going to have some fear because you're going off blind faith that what I'm telling you is true. So yeah, you're going to have some fear. It's going to creep up a little bit with the symptoms, but at some point, you have to realize what's happening in your brain and realize I'm going on a downward spiral. You could stop this right now. And that's when he told me, you just tell yourself it's just the nervous system because that's what it is. It is just the nervous system. Miguel, you're not going to die. You're not just going to stop breathing. You're not going to collapse right here, right? It's just the nervous system. And so I had to tell myself that, but I also had to believe it. Not for a long time, just for half a second. You have to believe it for half a second that this is your nervous system. It's just a software glitch. Because what we're doing is we're creating a new reference point for your brain to work towards. You need some kind of sense of safety, even for half a second. Because when you're in the middle of all this in this mess, your brain doesn't have a reference point for safety. It's trying to find it, but it just goes further off the cliff, right? So it's having that reference point for safety, even for half a second. I think that was so important. But was that what it was for you as well? It was trying to feel safe in your body for even half a second and start trusting yourself, even just a tiny bit at first?
Yes, when I finally understood how brain training worked, and that it was actually a very scientifically proven thing. When I understood about how different limiting beliefs were stopping me from uh, doing certain activities, and the way I responded to symptoms, and when I finally started practicing that brain training, and I was trying to, every time that I would do an activity, I would try to calm my brain down, calm my body down, and remind myself that I'm actually safe, that I'm not doing anything dangerous, that this cannot harm me, and that the symptoms that I'm experiencing, all they are is just very unpleasant. And they were, very unpleasant, and the aftermath was very debilitating. Um, but I knew that, even the fact that I'm doing this activity now, whatever I was doing, and first, it started with just going and sitting in my wheelchair, going for literally a 1 minute walk. Somebody would have to push me in the wheelchair. Um, Even the fact that I was doing that activity um, was there due to me doing that brain training and explaining to my brain, reminding myself that I am safe, and and then I started to write down the different things and the different wins that I've had as well, which I knew was important, because then I wanted to look back at, a week ago I went out for a minute and I sat there in my chair, so I can do this again, and actually I can do more, and slowly my body started to come back to that feeling of safety, and my brain as well. And yeah, I was able to do more and more. And actually, you asked me in the beginning, like, what kind of things can I do now? What is my life like after recovering? Uh, but I believe so much in the fact that um, it's the recovery and healing is everything to do with our brain and our mind, much more than it is to do with our body in a way.
100%. 100%. I agree with that.
Yeah, that even at the point, I think it was beginning of 2023, or around that time, New Year, I think. I remember I was still bedridden, but at that point, I chose to refer to myself and to say to other people that I'm actually healed.
Mhm.
And that's when I started my Instagram channel, um, my page, sorry. And yeah, I already considered myself healed. And some people might not agree with that, and they might still argue with me and whatever. But I was already healed at that point because my brain um, understood completely what I need to do in order to get better and better physically. I had very little fear left about doing activities and how my recovery is going to look. I pretty much had um, very little fear about never recovering. Like, I knew that I was going to recover. So, for all intents and purposes, I was healed, and I see that as a much more important factor and way to describe someone as healed and to understand if you are healed or not. It's not in you being able to climb a mountain, which I couldn't do at that point because I was still in bed. But I knew that, well, it's only a matter of time. In a few months I will be able to climb a mountain. And in fact, I have seen people who can climb a mountain, but because they haven't reached that point of completely changing the way they think and the mindset works, and they haven't completely retrained their brain, that they still have a lot of fear, which is what you can see when people push and crash, and they're like, oh, well, I went out for the day and then I crashed for 5 days. Then I went out and then I crashed. And that push and crash cycle is is the opposite of that, where a person can be, they might be able to even do much more than I was at that point, but they're not healed because it's all about your brain and your mindset. It's not really about what your body can do, because your body will at some point catch up anyway with your brain. And it's kind of like, again, I like giving an example of just doing exercises and going to the gym. If you just start going to the gym and you might have a lot of pain, that's normal, that's fine. But it's only a matter of time that at a certain point, doing that same exercise will not give you any more pain. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's all about how you think of things, how you perceive them, and again, that language, that neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a big fan of that. In regards to brain training, how you talk, how you think, what words you use. So if you consider yourself still healing and not recovered 10 years after you'd already understood everything about recovery, then you're probably going to stay in that stage of healing forever. I'm not healing right now. I'm optimizing my health. And I was
Mhm.
healed when I was already bedridden, which again, some people might not agree with, but that's how I define recovery.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's something interesting. We had to figure that out too, because we work with hundreds of people. We have a couple thousand people use our recovery system. But, when I was putting this system together in the beginning, I really had to figure out what is the finish line? How do we know that somebody has beat this thing? And even up until a few months ago, we're still trying to figure out exactly what that means. Because before we thought, okay, if they can if they can live life without symptoms, that's recovered. Okay, but people have different versions of living life. Someone's
Yeah.
an athlete, someone's a banker. So where do you draw that line? Where's that line in the sand where you cross the finish line? And we tried so many times for so long to figure out what that was, and we realized there is no finish line.
Mm.
It's a mix of multiple things, and overall, the way I see it is, what is your quality of life? Is it the same or better than before? And quality of life, that's a mixture of physical, mental, emotional well-being, right? So there's so many factors that come into it. Um, One of the things that really helped me, just like it helped you, was relabeling myself as somebody who is, you know, I I told myself I'm not sick with CFS. I just have a hypersensitive nervous system. There's just a glitch in the system. Doesn't mean I'm broken. Doesn't mean I'm never going to heal. But when I changed my identity and the label of somebody with CFS, and I replaced that with somebody with just a hypersensitive nervous system, it changed so many
Mm,
things because the label CFS has so many things attached to it. I mean, we've seen horror forums with all these things around CFS, but hypersensitive nervous system, to me, whenever I thought of that, I'm like, that's solvable. And I actually have the blueprint to that. My doctor gave it to me. So it becomes a very solvable problem, which makes logical sense. Whereas CFS, it's like you're going up against this titan, right? I looked at it like if I was a superhero, CFS is like this villain the size of a planet, and I have to defeat that thing.
mm,
Well, that's crazy. With all the stories built around CFS, but with a hypersensitive nervous system, it's like this tiny little troll, right?
mm,
Much easier to defeat, even just mentally when you think about it. So the label of CFS is so important.
yeah.
What do you consider yourself? But also, for me, when I was in a wheelchair and my doctor told me this stuff, I knew. I, I remember thinking in my mind and feeling it. Recovery's in the bag. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm recovered. Like it's
Yeah.
just a matter of time. But
Yeah.
mentally, I know exactly what to do. So there's no mystery around it. I'm just going to keep
Mhm.
doing this thing, and it's just a matter of time. And that's what we hear a lot of from people who recover. It's like even people who can't leave their house, they're like, "Oh, I know exactly what to do." So I'm
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
recovered. I'm a normal person. It's just my body's taking time to physically
Yeah.
catch up, you
Yeah.
know? It's so true what you said too, though. Like it's interesting to see what people deem as full recovery. So there are people who can run and go to the gym 4 times a week and work full time, and they'll say, "No, I'm still recovering."
Yeah.
And there's somebody who just started to drive again and was
Mhm.
just started going to the mall, and they're like, "No, I'm recovered. It's
Mhm.
just a matter of time." And
Mhm.
those people recover, they make progress way faster
Yeah. Yeah.
than the people who say, "No, I could do all this stuff, but I'm still recovering."
Exactly. Yeah.
It's
I've
so
seen it
interesting
so
to see.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen hundreds of times.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So that's when I realized recovery is a state of mind, and it's how safe do you feel in your body, how much do you trust yourself. And I
Mhm.
know there's people who are going to be watching this there and they'd be like, "What?" So someone who's bedridden, if they think they're recovered, that means they're recovered. What are you guys talking about? Well, it's not what we're saying, but what we're saying is the label you put on yourself. I think people underestimate how much of a role that plays in someone's rate of recovery, how many times they flare up, but like how intense the flare ups are. That's probably the biggest factor. It's what do you label yourself as? But before you even get to that point, you need to have a solid foundation of understanding of what's going on. So I think that's what people are missing. It's you can't just tell yourself this. You can't convince yourself this.
Mhm.
You have to do it logically by understanding what's even going on. Because once it
Mhm.
makes sense, man, you don't have to have blind faith because it makes logical sense now. You know, it's like if someone wants to build a building, if someone wasn't an engineer, they're like, okay, well, we'll stack the bricks here, put a pole here, put the floor here. Hopefully that building stays up. I'm hoping, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully the wind doesn't blow it away. But if you get a team of engineers, they know what they're doing. They know it's not going to fall down. They know it's solid. It's kind of like with recovery. If once you're going based off real principles that have worked for other people, you don't have to hope that you don't crash. You know you're not going to crash.
Yeah.
And I'm at that point now where I know I'm not going to crash. I'll go do some crazy stuff just to prove that I'm not going to crash. Last
Mhm.
week, I signed up for the Honolulu Marathon in Hawaii on 7 hours notice. There's no
Mhm.
way I should have been able to run that. um, if I didn't have a strong mindset. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm not going to crash. I
Mhm.
can't. And even if I did get symptoms, I know exactly what to do. So, I control what happens to my body, but you also
Mhm.
got to be responsible for what you do. So I don't do that all the time.
Yeah.
I kind of take it easy sometimes. I agree. The label is so important.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's crazy. But any big any other big golden nuggets you have for people? Um, what's the biggest thing you would say that would move the needle? I mean, there's so many things, right? Other than belief that they can recover, what's one big practical thing they can do to start rewiring their brain for recovery and optimizing their health?
Um, I think apart from what we've talked about, brain retraining, looking into your limiting beliefs, the way you neuro-linguistic programming, the way you talk, the way you think, having the right mindset. You also need to look, well, I'm personally a fan of holistic health in every way, because that's one of the things that's going to add to your load of whatever it is that brought you to the point of getting sick. So, looking in your environment and making it as the least toxic as possible. Looking into nutritionally, what you eat, what deficiencies you might have. These are all just simple, practical things that you can do to help your body while you're recovering. But I think you should keep on doing that even after you recover, because again, I think the goal for all of us should be to have optimal health, not to simply recover and be, and have kind of like a mediocre life where you're like, okay, well, now I don't have symptoms. I want to become strong in every way. I want everyone who's listening to this to become strong in every way. So another thing that I would suggest looking at is what kind of boundaries you have with
It's
things,
important.
people around you. Because I personally, again, believe that 50% if we look at all the tools, it's hard to say exactly how much, but I would say 40 to 50% of my recovery, and for the majority of people, would be what kind of boundaries they have. Do they even understand what it means to have healthy boundaries? Do they know how to practice that? And that applies not only to how you interact with people around you, that also applies to even the boundaries that you have with your own self, which is where things like perfectionism, pushing yourself comes from, people pleasing, and all these things. They can drain the life out of you, literally, all your energy. They can give you chronic symptoms. If it's not taken seriously, if you don't have healthy boundaries, if you don't set them. So yeah, I would definitely look into that, and I think no recovery should be without addressing this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. Boundaries, that's something I'm even working on right now still. And I find when I'm not able to draw my boundaries and set them, that's when I get the most stressed because I end
Mm,
up doing things I don't want to do or doing a deal that I don't want to do. And I'm
yeah.
like beating myself up after because I don't want to disappoint people. So I'll say yes. But
Hmm.
afterwards, it eats away at me sometimes. So
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest thing that I need to work on. And I
Mm,
think most people with CFS, that's part of why they get sick in the first place is it's they don't know how to set those boundaries.
yeah.
So super, super important.
Mm,
But this was an awesome chat. We're almost
mm,
an hour in. This amazing. So many golden nuggets here. And I think we both have similar stories or similar recoveries in the sense that, we had to realize it was the brain that was the culprit behind a lot of this stuff. And there's definitely a lot of crossovers in both of our stories and our approaches into how we share education on how people can recover. So appreciate you so much for coming on here and sharing some of your story and some of your tips and stuff. If you guys watching this right now, if you want to learn more about, Santa, you can follow her Instagram. I'll pop it up right over here or somewhere on the screen. But hope you guys got a lot out of this one. Definitely watch this one back again. It was a little bit more of a technical chat than the usual recovery interviews, but she's somebody who's making an impact on the community, and we're going to continue to do so and try to help as many people as possible. So if you guys found this useful, go give her a follow. If you did need some more help, you can see in the links down below. There's different recovery systems we have that can help you get unstuck. But Santa, thank you so much. Appreciate your time. And for all you guys watching right now, always remember that you are a thriver and you are just one mind shift away from living a life with thriving health. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Santa, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.